People come to the garage from every single job function, like legal, HR, finance. Like something we've learned is like, geez, a hackathon where only engineers are showing up.
Yeah.
It's still interesting. Stuff gets built, but the projects that go the furthest are when people from engineering functions and non-engineering functions, like diverse cross-functional teams, are coming together. Those are the projects that make the most impact and go the furthest. Now, how do we create structures for them to test ideas and make it safe for them to do it, make it safe for people to meet everybody else across the company? So there are different types of safety you need to create. Like in some, if it has too much structure, you have to create more safety to be unstructured. If it has too little structure, you have to provide enough structure and enough so on to make things. If you're in the middle, you have to create pathways for ideas to come forward, and you need to be able to activate the members of the company.
I really believe that every organization should have its own garage, not just as a physical space, but more as a program that enables the physical space, allocates the resources, and provides time to its employees, all the employees, to tinker, experiment, test ideas, and push their own boundaries, all in service of both their own personal growth and the organization's future. When an organization creates a garage like that, it does not simply offer an opportunity to its employees to innovate. Instead, it creates the conditions for continuous innovation, continuous improvement, incremental improvement, which over time builds the foundation for breakthrough solutions to come forth. You may wonder why. Well, because programs like that do not only permit the employees to tinker with the new ideas, instead, they invite the employees to tinker by default. And that makes a big difference. Luckily, there is an organization just like that we all know of. This is Microsoft, and the program is called just like that, Microsoft Garage. The Garage was launched in 2014 and is Microsoft's internal innovation engine. To date, it has activated hundreds of thousands of employee innovators from all functions of the company and has generated over 20,000 different innovations. It has seeded innovations from Xbox adaptive controller to underwater data centers. So that's why I'm thrilled today to welcome Ed Essey, the Senior Director of Business Value at the Microsoft Garage. In his role, Ed coaches employees that come to the garage and helps them turn their passion into real deployed impact. He has coached them since 2014, and there are a few that he continues to coach to date. So that's why I'm so thrilled to talk to him and learn from his unique experience and firsthand exposure of what does it take to activate innovators already among the employees to build the scaffolding that helps turning their ideas into deployed innovations and nourish the culture for this innovation mindset and spirit to thrive. And ultimately, to learn how might we be able to replicate efforts like this in any organization of any size. I'm your host, Iliriana Kachanico, an innovation strategist at heart, and this is Activate Innovation Lounge podcast. We are both on a mission to help leaders like you, with or without innovation, entitled to activate innovators, innovation, and innovation culture or capability. You pick. So if this sounds like you, hit subscribe or follow wherever you get this podcast, and let's welcome Ed Essey. Ed Essey, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on another podcast episode to continue our conversations that are always so energizing, and especially because you are one of the very few people that I connected instantly when started talking, because we both care about activating innovators and from different perspectives and walks of life. So I'm thrilled to unpack the magic of activating innovation and innovators with you today. But let me play justice to your journey. And instead of me introducing yourself, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Who is Ed Essey?
Well, I contain multitudes, Iliriana. But in this life, in this body at this time, it's best to start with my calling, which is to empower people to know their worth and use their gifts to make meaningful change. And the way I've been doing it over the past 24 years, and I just had my 24-year anniversary at Microsoft last week. So I've been at the same company 24 years. It's been about innovation from within a large company that has great leverage and a great mission, which is about empowering every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And over the last 12 years, I've been in a part of that company called the Microsoft Garage, which is about creating a culture of innovation and accelerating this cultural transformation by creating opportunities for employees all over the company to experiment, collaborate, and be creative in the service of grassroots innovation. And a big part of what I do is I work with just amazing people from all over the company, and I help them turn their passion into real impact. I'm also the author of a book that helps me scale this mission outside of Microsoft called The Inside Job. It it's called The Inside Job is just a reference to my realization that often it feels like there's a heist movie, like a crew of really interesting people trying to pull off the impossible in a system that doesn't seem designed to let it, but still has all the capabilities to help accelerate it if they're able to figure out how to unlock that. And outside of my work, I do a lot to help high performers all over the world, like be empowered in whatever their work situations are. And I help the high performers in my own life, my two children and my lovely partner, be the best that they can, know their worth and use their gifts. And they're constantly making meaningful change in themselves and in the world.
That's beautiful and noble. So, where does your why come from?
Where, sorry, where
Where does your why come from? Where does your calling come
my
from?
why, where does it come from? I don't like it came to me at some point in my life. Like as a child, I was really interested in computers and the religions of the world, like both of those things. And even in I think when I was in 6th grade it was, I have made a proposal for a travel business plan to for somebody to be able to travel, like so that somebody could create a business plan to travel to all the major religious and spiritual centers around the world. And so that
Wow.
was something I was interested in from the time I was 11 or 12, just understanding how spirituality worked, religion worked, how wisdom works. And I love technology too. So I I've always wanted to connect the spiritual wise side of things to technology and to help people like truly see who they are at the level of their own worth.
That is beautiful. And now you're bringing me to the question that I really want to ask. And like you mentioned, Microsoft Garage. I really believe that every organization should have its own garage, a virtual or a physical place, a program or a time allocated or dedicated for people to go and tinker with new things, experiment, push their own boundaries, try new things to continuously grow individually and with the organization. So there are probably a lot of people that don't know what Microsoft Garage is. So would you
Mm.
please just give us a brief introduction? Why did Microsoft Garage start? When did it start? And what's the foundation? How does it operate briefly?
Sure. Sure. And it started in 2008 in Microsoft. It was a conversation between uh, a few people. One of his name was Quinn Hawkins and another named Jen Mickelstein. And their leader was Chris Prattley, who is like famous at Microsoft for the creation of OneNote. And they had this idea like, how do we ensure that the company is operating as much as at our roots as it can be? And Microsoft was founded over 50 years ago in a garage in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so that metaphor of the garage is harkening back to that. And it kind of became a movement that so many people around the company just started showing up to events. And some of the first events were like developer designer speed dating and stay late in code and meet your maker events. But over the years, it kept growing and growing. It was a one person program until I was running it in 2014. I was the third one person. After Quinn, there was Ben. You might know Ben Gilbert if you've heard of the Acquired podcast. It's that Ben Gilbert. So I took over running the garage after Ben Gilbert. And shortly after that, Satya became CEO of Microsoft. And the garage kind of took off from there because Satya was such a huge fan of the garage. He even did his first public address to the company, his first town hall inside the garage headquarters in Redmond. Now it has spread like all across the company and all across the world. And we have chapters of the garage on many continents, and we have hackers in the tens of thousands showing up every year working on things that really matter to them.
And this is where you combine the individual and the technology to do more, to innovate, to solve new problems, generate new solutions, push their own boundaries. So, without any underestimation, but also without any specific details, what would you say, in your own words, has been the impact of the Microsoft Garage so far on the company and the culture of the people?
Okay, so on the company and the culture of the people, even if you went back 12 years to 2014, there was a company-wide survey, and there always is a company-wide poll. What are the top contributors to the company's culture? And there was a write-in question. And the garage was number 2 on that write-in question. The year of our very first hackathon, it was number 2 right after our own CEO, the new CEO, Satya Nadella. And any CEO should be the number 1 impact on culture. The fact that the garage was the number 2 on that survey, I think goes to say a lot. And something we started doing was we took all the company's cultural survey questions about, does it support diverse and inclusive and customer obsession and growth mindset? Like we have 5 definitions at Microsoft, and we took the same questions from the poll, but we also polled all the people with it where we had substituted in the word garage, and we got to see really, really high scores across the board there. So we know in pretty much every cultural dimension that the company cared about, the garage made that difference. And it made it because of the foundation. Our motto is doers, not talkers. So by giving people an opportunity to actually do the things that drive those meaningful changes, like actually do that innovation, that ended up really igniting the whole company.
You're making me start asking some questions that I thought I was going to ask later on, but they're more important to ask now. So, why do people engage with the garage? Why do people come to the garage? Why people value the freedom to tinker so much?
Why do people value going to Central Park in New York?
If I am to go to a Central Park or any other park, it's definitely to refresh, re-energize, like my walk-in meditation, process everything that I've been learning or listening and working on, take a break, relax. But that's the part.
Yeah. Do you ever have those projects you worked on, Ilariana, where even when you're working hard, they feel restorative, they feel refreshing? Like you might stay up late at night, like digging into something or
Of course,
working for weeks on end?
of course, of course. But those are the ones that we'll do on the side as hobbies. But how many organizations create that space for people to explore things like that at the working place?
Exactly. And so people get to do that with all the matchmaking systems and the connectivity that we have to meet and work with other people, crews of other people who are being activated across the company to work on whatever they are passionate about working on. And that space, that permission to experiment, that freedom to make mistakes, that idea that you could bring in whatever your passion or your skill set is and your whole person to work in a way that, maybe your job description doesn't say you could work on it, but you could bring in that whole thing and work with other people who get to bring in all of those like magical aspects of themselves. And like, I love your term activate because I talk about activation energy all the time. And what I see is that people are always like providing that activation energy like electrons to move up to the next orbit.
And to push their own boundaries,
To push their own boundaries, to try new things. Yeah. And we see that it creates this like really positive emotions. I'm a big fan of the positive psychology movement. And Barbara Fredrickson is like a particular person whose work I love. And she talks about like, what's the point of positive emotions? Psychologists did a lot of work exploring what's the point of negative emotions. Negative emotions often make you really focused. So like fear makes you very focused on solving a particular problem where you feel like you're missing something. Anger makes you very focused about taking care of a threat. Sadness Like when people are sad, they often stop being hungry, their energy goes down and so on. Like that's a way for people to like limit and control what their resources are so that they can focus on solving. Well, for sadness, it's usually a people interconnection problem. And so it's like, how do I solve this one person to person problem that I'm having? Like that's what sadness does. Okay, what Barbara Fredrickson did was turn it on its head and like, what's the point of positive emotions? And positive emotions do the opposite of these
Mhm.
negative feeling emotions. They create experiences to broaden and build, broaden relationships, broaden thinking, build connections with other people, actually build things with your minds and your hands and so on. And so that's what the garage experience does is it gets people in the conditions of broaden and build so that they're able to make just amazing things in the world.
And as Amy Edmondson teaches us, it provides that safe space to tinker, to learn, not to fail, but to be open to expect the unexpected and see,
Yeah.
if I've become curious to see what is going to happen if I do this, and I'm not going to be spoken at like, oh, you did not dedicate your time to these KPIs, but you went to the garage and did this or that. That's not going to be that kind of obstacle. There will be a
Right.
safety, right? So there's also like there's something that I want to ask you, but before I do, I want to ask also something about the innovators. So with since 2000, and this is like a long history of activating innovators. But
Mhm.
have you had the chance to see what are the core traits of the persona who come to the garage, and what have been the least expected functions that people have come from to try something new, to solve something, to push a boundary?
Like the job functions?
Yeah.
People come to the garage from every single job function, like legal, HR, finance. Something we've learned is like, geez, a hackathon where only engineers are showing up. No, it's still interesting. Stuff gets built, but the projects that go the furthest are when people from engineering functions and non-engineering functions, like diverse cross-functional teams, are coming together. Those are the projects that make the most impact and go the furthest.
Because the design thinking at the end of the day, it is about the process, but above all, it's about bringing different perspectives and different diverse backgrounds and expertises to look into a problem from as different angles as possible to see how the problem impacts different people before figuring out what the solution has to happen. And that's pretty beautiful. So would you be
Yeah.
able, would you have data like what is the number of people that have involved? What is the number of solutions that have come out of the garage? And especially if there's any product that we keep using nowadays and it
Oh yeah,
comes
so many.
from the garage. So not only products that happened like were used internally, but also products that made it to the world.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number of people, but in any given year, our annual flagship hackathon, and by the way, on almost any day around the world, we have like 8 or more hackathons happening at any
Wow.
day around the world on our platform. But we have one big annual one that's like our huge event, and we have about 70 to 90,000 people participate in some way in that every year. And I think altogether, if we look over it in the current employee base of the company, I believe it's almost 150,000 members of the company. Like the current members of the company have participated in the hackathon in some way, and we offer multiple ways of participating, from hacking and to sponsoring and advising and so on. So we have a number of ways. Huge volumes of hackers show up. I think most our highest number of projects from one hackathon ever was over 20,000 from one event. 20,000 projects from one event. In terms of things you might know of, like, gosh, there are so many features in like, so do you use Outlook at all?
I used to, not now. I'm
Okay,
on
so
Google Workspace for the time being.
okay, do you know if you send an email message and there's like a thumbnail of the person who sent it to you?
Yeah.
That came from a hackathon at the Microsoft Garage. That idea, which is now in almost every email platform, the first time it ever happened was in Outlook, and that came from the Microsoft Garage. I don't know if you've ever used Microsoft Teams. Like there are a whole bunch of things, like little things like that 5-minute warning before the end of the meeting, the together mode where everybody could sit together, different ways that it does eye tracking. A whole bunch of this stuff came from when Teams was being used in the first year of COVID, and a lot of people were working remotely. Like Teams was taking projects from the hackathon all the time and putting it in there. I'll give kind of a bigger one. So have you heard in the news that like 3 Mile Island was coming back online to power data centers?
I must have missed that one.
Okay, so like Microsoft's investment in nuclear energy around the world to provide like sustainable power and lots of investments in clean energy and so on around the planet. The solutions that power that, including how permits get created for those began as Microsoft Garage projects. So, and
That was the winning solution of the last year's garage or hackathon, because the winning team had figured out how to solve the backlog for the permissions applications for power something.
that was one of the winners. That's right. So
Yeah.
like to get permitting of a new reactor, I believe the numbers were like over $10 million in like 10 years to get the permits in place. And they found ways that we could write the permits a lot faster with the help of AI. And so I think you read that story in my book. It's in chapter 11.
Actually, I read it on a blog post of yours.
Oh, you did? Okay. So yeah, that was a Microsoft Garage Wall of Fame entry. Another one that people know, a lot of people know, the Xbox Adaptive Controller.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that was Microsoft's first ever Super Bowl commercial. The first time I ever heard a garage project talked about just on the radio, I was just hearing like radio folks, was one called Seeing AI, which is it's like you could pull out your phone, you could point it at stuff and it would describe what you were seeing. And this was for people who are visually impaired. Now we take a lot of that for granted, because you could pretty much drag and drop any image into like, an AI powered chat interface and it will tell you what's on it. But the original models to do that came from a garage hackathon. We know that some data centers are underwater because the ocean can cool the data centers, or they could be in the river. That actually began in the Microsoft garage in Redmond, Washington. Somebody put a computer board. It was an ARM board, and they put it in a Ziploc bag and wrapped it in tape and stuck it in a fish tank to test if that would cool the data center. And then that became the prototype that led to Project Natick and now water cooled data centers. So I could keep listing examples like this for a long time, actually.
And I'm glad you can, because that can give us a lot of material for a lot of other conversations in the future. And now let's get into the real discussion of scaffolding, because all of these solutions have come up as an idea. And we know that there are a lot of organizations that they will listen to the ideas, but that's the way we will end, right? Because they don't have a process in place. They don't incentivize or support the leaders, like middle management leaders, to cultivate these ideas. And from your experience with Microsoft Garage, what does it take to give ideas a chance to grow into either a solution that will be used internally for internal operational improvements, or go to the market either as an incremental innovation, as you explained a few examples, or breakthrough, as with underwater data centers? So what does it take to give that idea a chance to life, to grow into a product?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so how long do you have? Because I could have written a few different books on this, and in fact, I wrote only one of them, but there were a few different angles of it. But
I'm happy to join so we write that one together. So offer to name it, because if that's a topic that I'm very passionate about. So tell me,
great.
I have time, so you could. If you give us a lot of material, I'm happy to break this episode in two. No, your fault.
Great.
Your
So
time.
so I know you heard the take I did at the Innovators conference. So I could talk about that a bit. Like, so how do you, like, what's the way that you do it top down? Like, so top down, if you happen to have a very innovative company, they empower their company, and that's great. People can work on what matters, and then they make plans for it forward. So in order to do that, they have to actually create pathways for innovations to move forward. So if anyone anywhere in the company has a brilliant idea, like, there needs to be a way that they could quickly and cheaply test it, like get the resources to test it, get executives who care about it to move it forward and take it forward. Now, a lot of that could happen from the top down. In many cases, it doesn't happen completely from the top down. So in other cases, people are trying to do it from the bottoms up in a hierarchy. Now, hierarchies were created in business in the 90s, but they were created in the world going back millennia because they were created by military. So if you go back even to the time of Genghis Khan, he used powers of 10. Like a general would have like 10 like colonels who reported to him, and a colonel would have like 10 majors who reported to him, all the way down to units of 10. So everything was like powers of 10 that went all the way up to Genghis Khan. And that was so orders could be disseminated up and down the chain. And that also ensures that like orders are passing, commanders' intent is in passing in the right way so that people are kind of doing what they're told and like breaking it down from vision to strategy to tactics. Now, it was brought into management theory in the 1950s, along the time when like factories were really coming on board. So it was like, how do we ensure that 10,000 rivets could be created with only 3% defaults on the rivets? Right? Like, and so it was meant to get issues out of the system. It was meant to reduce uncertainty and remove mistakes and variance. Now, that's like the opposite of what works for innovation, because you want that opportunity for that variance and people trying new things. So the hierarchy doesn't do that. So what you need to do is create some way that you are creating a network effect that's layered on the company, bringing it back to what it was when it was that company that was first in the garage, where every member of the company, we're just sitting around, sitting at tables or, tables in a coffee shop, and everybody could talk to everybody else. But over time, once you get to like hundreds of thousands of people, the CEO doesn't talk to any of the new hires. It's very, very hard to. And so there aren't even opportunities for people to share their ideas. So what we now have to do is create this double-sided market to where the leadership talks about what they care about and issues challenges. The employees get to work on those challenges because they see opportunities that are framed up by the leadership that they care about. And then they work on things and they meet those things. And then they find a way to meet together. Like, hey, here's my approach to that. And they talk to the leader, and then they have to have ways to move it forward. So then now the other point is like, how do we create those pathways for innovation? And I could spend a lot of time breaking this down because different types and categories of innovation require the pathways to be different. Like, for instance, if you're going to make a feature, if you're going to put a feature in a product that already exists, like say I want to put a checkbox in Microsoft Word, and I happen to work on the Word team, that's pretty easy. Not always easy because that checkbox will be seen by 100 million people around the world. So even like Word is really careful about it, but that's a lot easier than say somebody who works in finance in another continent thinking about that checkbox, right? So we need to create the opportunities to make that, but that's still a different path than if you want to create an entirely new business from scratch that doesn't map to any of the existing leadership areas of the company. Right, you need to create a completely new pathway to test and grow that kind of business idea. And then in between that, there are a lot of other things. Like if you want to create a new SKU of something that was made for enterprises, but now deliver it to families, right? Like there's a different kind of work than either the new business or the checkbox that you put on Word, right? Anyway, I could keep going.
Talking about Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3 of innovation.
You're right. I went 1, 3.
Yeah. And so they all have different time span, and they will all require different levels of commitment, absolutely different pathways and processes. But when it comes to activating individual innovators via programs like Garage, or maybe, and I love that you mentioned challenges, that the leaders set up the challenges and then the employees come to meet midway. For which horizon, initiatives like Microsoft Garage are best positioned to activate those internal innovators on a regular basis?
Well, it's the same division of this that exists anywhere. Horizon 1 is always the easiest. Horizon 2 is a little bit harder. Horizon 3 is the hardest. There was one year I looked at every one of 2,000 pitches that existed, and I categorized them by Horizon 1, 2, 3. I also looked at internal culture processes and tool change, which those are always the easiest, by the way,
Mhm.
even though the change management of them is hard. Getting a pilot run is the easiest. And then the other one is external, like for good, like whether you're creating a nonprofit or supporting a
Mhm.
nonprofit or positive impact entrepreneurship. Like so I consider those the five main categories of innovation that need to move. Even strategic new initiatives, I would call that internal culture processes and tools.
Absolutely.
What I saw was out of 2000, it was about 53 that were Horizon 3. There were a couple hundred that were Horizon 2, and it was about 400 that were Horizon 3. There was almost 200, maybe 2 to 300 that were for society, and then the rest of them were all for
Horizon.
internal culture processes and tools. That's what I saw from a sample of
Mhm.
about 1,891 projects in 1 year, and that was the year 2017.
So, which ones do you so like there's one thing that you are very passionate about, and that's the concept of entrepreneurs. And
Yeah,
that resonates with me because I think that I was an entrepreneur before there was a word to name us
right.
entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But in Microsoft, in a technology company, do entrepreneurs have a drive to come up with ideas or solutions in Horizon 1, 2, or 3, more likely?
Like it's still always like Horizon 1 is the easiest to see. And
But
yeah.
entrepreneurship is more about like starting something bigger. So I would
Yeah.
like
And
something more novel than incremental. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them more in Horizon 2 and 3.
well, okay, so it depends on your operating definition of entrepreneur. Like,
Okay.
so for me, my operating definition of entrepreneur, it starts with understanding like what a hacker is and how I see a hacker. I'm looking around because I have my hacker hat, but I'm missing it. Yeah. I'm missing it right now. Hackers are employees who are like incentivized to make some kind of change, to do what it takes to make a change. And they're usually like scrappy, resourceful, like applying it toward making some kind of change. Entrepreneurs, I know a lot of people view it as, hey, an entrepreneur who works inside a company.
Mhm.
I view it as a hacker who is invested over the long haul in making meaningful change.
I subscribe to that definition, to the second one of yours. Yeah.
So, what really good hackers do is they figure out how to wasn't Archimedes who said like, if you give me a big enough lever like and the right fulcrum, I can move the world. Like so they are always looking for where's the fulcrum so that they could move what they need to. So they're really really good at taking systems that already exist and using them to make the change that they want. So I think really good hackers are able to take a Horizon 3 idea, but to find a Horizon 1 starting point.
And how do we cultivate those kind of entrepreneurs then? How do we cultivate them? How do we identify them? How do we cultivate them? And how do we make sure that then they stay in the company, they don't leave?
Yeah, gosh, I think they all want to do it. I think they all want to do it. And so what you have to do is like I think people want to focus on ideas that are big enough to matter, small enough to win. And so even though they might have a big vision, and I think almost everybody begins with Horizon 3 visions, but they have to bring it down to a Horizon 1 starting point, and they have
Mhm.
to find that place to work on it. So, in order to keep them in the company, you have to keep giving them opportunities to when they work on that Horizon 1 idea, that starting point, you actually you give them a chance to listen and or you listen to them and you test it and you find a way for them to actually work on it, not suppress it, but make the space for them and the psychological safety and everything to give them the opportunities to work on those ideas and let them earn the funding to make it a little bigger and a little
Mhm.
bigger and a little bigger by a series of phases that will eventually open up to the big vision. And so many of like the biggest things in the world began by like testing an idea in a very small market and then expanding it by one dimension to the next until it became huge. And I think that's actually the most successful way to do it, is to approach it from small scale instead of from the large scale.
And do entrepreneurs operate best on their own or in a crew?
I think they do it best in a crew, and you know that from the inside job. Yeah.
Yes. So why crew and who are the members of this crew?
Oh yeah. So what why crew? So I started looking at, like, I came to this, like I kind of backed into it because that's what I was seeing. Part of my job is that I coach the winners of hackathon projects toward moving their projects forward in a company. And I do this every year. I coach dozens of projects every single year, teams of people over like longitudinal coaching. I'm still coaching some people and teams that I met in 2014. Uh,
Amazing.
on on a regular basis. So I'm able to see over that 12-year span, like the different changes and journeys they go through, and like where their promotions come from, where they get stuck, where they need to make shifts, and they come and they share these things with me. But every year, I'm also getting fresh ones and constantly analyzing this and seeing where it's coming from, where it's going. Now, what I've seen is that the very best teams usually have a strong leader or a few leaders who are like the masterminds of that idea. And they have people with different skill sets. It can't all be the same skill set, right? Like if we were looking at, a soccer or what the rest of the world calls football team, you can't have 11 goalies on the pitch. That doesn't make sense. Right? Right. You can't have 11 strikers on the pitch. You don't even want all 11 right-footed players on the pitch, right?
But even Ted Lasso.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So you needed these things. And what I started seeing was, like, as I was watching movies, I kept realizing, like, it's all these different character angles that really made a difference. Like, often it wasn't just their skill sets, it was their cognitive differences and their personality differences that were making or breaking the projects. And what I looked for is like, okay, every team needs somebody who is a change maker, somebody who could like actually take something and make it. Like they need a taste maker, somebody who could figure out how to sell that thing that was made to somebody else. Actually, that's the deal maker could sell it to somebody else. The taste maker is somebody who makes it really cool and appealing and interesting. And there are so many different like prototypes of these people, but you need those three makers: the change maker, the deal maker, and the taste maker. But then projects need other very specific skill sets. But outside of the skill set, it is the temperaments and the personality and the diversity of all these people that really pull it off. And so that's when I started thinking, I'm like, well, where have I seen this before? I've seen it in movies like Guardians of the Galaxy. I've seen it, I've seen it in The Hobbit. I've seen it in The Lord of the Rings. And so I'm like, well, what are all these? These are heist
Good
movies.
job. Ocean 11.
Ocean's 11. Yes. Yes. Ocean's 11, 12,
Charlie's
13,
Angel.
8. Yeah. Charlie, like these diverse cross-functional people. Like they intentionally make them diverse and their skill sets diverse, like K-pop demon hunters, right? Like these diverse teams. But what really made it feel like a heist movie to me is like they were often trying to do something. They were trying to understand the system really, really well so they could pull something off in it. And many of my favorite heist movies, eventually, like the vault kind of opened itself, where you would realize that the heist crew was not trying to do anything that was illicit or bad, that they often had a Robin Hood like moral. And in many sequels, actually, the government hires that heist crew to help them solve an issue that they have. So yeah, even if you watch like the Despicable Me's, right? like these are heist movies, and Gru became a member of the government and a spy that was helping that network. So I love these, and I thought, like, not only that, but it also carries weight, because if you're thinking about it as a heist movie, there's often a subversiveness to the hierarchy that's implied here, which is a big part of what you have to do. You have to learn how to navigate the hierarchy without following all the unwritten rules of the hierarchy.
So then in the heist movies, the team will very often fall apart after the heist. So when
Yeah.
it comes to innovation, what is your advice to put these teams together for the purpose of solving the challenge, or to put them together and or to establish a standing team of these different personalities that will continuously go on a innovation heist after innovation heist?
Yeah, so I'll put on what you're saying. Like, so the ones who like in the heist movies themselves, like the ones that if there's any falling apart, it's because there was some lack of trust between certain members of the team, and then or there's usually a twist, right? Like you're thinking that some members of the team might have doubted each other, but it was actually part of like a con that they were pulling off on the mark, but they actually were deeply trusting each other. So usually the crews that are successful and have a good exit do trust each other and stay together or connected and in trust after this. And that has to be true of these teams. But what I've seen is the best teams are not the ones that are put together by the hierarchy. They're the ones where the team members chose themselves. And a like a very recurring pattern I've seen is that people who are on crews that work in this way, they create their own code. Their they bond as a group. They make their own set of agreements and principles. Here's how we're going to work together. Here's what we're going after. Here's our target that we're going to achieve. That these crews that stay together years later, they're inviting each other to their weddings. And that doesn't happen in that same ratio uh, that people invite back people who were in their teams that were assigned by the hierarchy.
I love this. Imagine you're talking to a CEO of a company of between 500 and 1,000 people. This person was until now saying innovation is not for us, we don't have time, but for some reason, this person woke up one morning and was like, I just heard about Microsoft Garage, I want to do exactly the same. But hey, 500 to 1,000 people. So what would be your 3 advices to this person on how to activate innovators, how to create the space for these crews, the innovation crews to come together, and then how to institutionalize it via anything like garage-like structure? But this person just wants to start.
First of all, I want to give any advice. I would ask questions. The first question coming to my mind is like, how old is this company? This 500 to 1,000 person company?
Yeah.
Because it would be different to me if they got to 1,000 people in, a few years, or if this is like a 100-year-old like family company. What's the difference? Like, so if they're like 100 years old or like a long time, then they're probably in an industry that's in some way commoditized, or in many ways they're also in a one industry town. There's going to be like very specific ways of thinking. Like, so for instance, if their industry is insurance or banking, insurance and banking both have a very similar problem in that all the consumers think they're the same company, and that the only difference is like which one's cheaper, right? Like, so for insurance, people want to buy it on cheapness. For banks, it's like which one's going to give you a greater return, or which one's going to be easiest for you to go to. But so what they're always trying to do, and these companies have been around for decades, right? So now, like, some of the things that differentiate is the usability. Like, oh, is the app good? Like, how easy is it for me to get checks? Are the fees gone? Like, these are things that people care about. So and now it's like, do they have a robo investor, right? That's been like the last 10 years. So, they're trying to figure out how to innovate and differentiate on it. And sometimes companies like a local bank could have 500 to 1,000 people if, they're a state or two, or maybe a single hospital. So innovating within that is going to be different than, say, they're a new tech startup that got to Series B in just a few years, and they've grown to 500 or 1,000. So if they're trying to solve like institutional problems and branding problems, it's a different approach to they're trying to scale one product as fast as it can be. At 500 to 1,000 people, there was one company, I'm not going to name any names. It was a tech company. They had about 1,000 people. And I went to a hackathon that they were hosting. Like, they had one major product that was flanked in a couple of areas. Like, one was to enterprise, one was to consumer. And then they were starting to build another offering on top of that. But they were too, they were very, very focused on one product. And are we ready to start building our second product? There are other companies like I'm very much a fan of Red Bull. The company. I'm not talking about the drink, but the company, it's really interesting. They have one product and they have one metric that matters. How many cans they sell. They have a few different flavors of it that they're changing, but it's just how many cans of Red Bull are they selling? And
Huh.
the vast majority of the company is marketing, right? They're not doing most of their innovation on new product. They're doing most of their innovation on marketing. So they market a lot to people who love sports. They market a lot to students on campus. Who are other people who want caffeinated energy drinks? Entrepreneurs. So how can we create events that let them know that we're going to give them wings? So that's how they're constantly thinking. And they're sponsoring people. They're doing a ton of amazing stuff on marketing. There's the New York Red Bulls, football club. So all these different ways that they're showing people like we're cool and we're hip and we're in. So what would I do for a company like that? It's a bit old. It's not like a couple years old. Like it's not like an AI era thing. So what would I do for there? I would absolutely create places where everyone in the company could bring their ideas forward, make it really easy for them to test these ideas, make it so that executives can offer challenges, like create that two-way market. If it's an older company, there are other things you have to do to get this going because people aren't necessarily going to believe you that you're trusting them to innovate. So what a lot of them are doing they're just trying to change the rules so that their employees can wear jeans to work. Uh, it's a completely different thing than if you're talking about a new tech company that's like burning fast. Like, what do you have to do there? You might have to put a little more structure in place because they already know how to move really fast and take chances and break things. Now, how do we create structures for them to test ideas and uh, make it safe for them to do it, make it safe for people to meet everybody else across the company. So there are different types of safety you need to create. Like in some, if it has too much structure, you have to create more safety to be unstructured. If it has too little structure, you have to provide enough structure and enough so on to make things. If you're in the middle, you have to create pathways for ideas to come forward, and you need to be able to activate the members of the company.
And even before you do that, I would both ask and recommend find the why. Why do you need to innovate? Why do you want to innovate now?
Yeah.
Why not till now? And what do you believe innovating is going to do for the company that nothing else has done so far? It does not have to be just company because it can be a not-for-profit, could be a philanthropy, could be a government office, because every kind of organization needs to innovate. It's not only for profits or the large corporations. And one thing that we're coming close to the end, but I cannot conclude this conversation without asking you, in your eyes, how is activating innovators changing in light of the artificial intelligence? How does it change the way that we empower people to
Yeah.
be more innovative, and to how do we leverage AI to enhance the current human skills that we have in our organizations rather than replace them?
Yeah, just an amazing question and an amazing set of technologies that we're facing and that we're empowered with, but at the same time we're facing because it's changing us, changing society, it changes how people think. I'd say the first thing is the three horizons is no longer the right metaphor. They're no longer time horizons. Like
The
huge industries and organizations are shifting and pivoting at the speed of hacking, no longer at the same speed that they were doing before, because AI not only makes that possible and inevitable, it makes it necessary. You have to. The speed, and before, for big organizations like reorging, I've heard executives say reorging is too slow. We have to empower people to act like hackers and completely reorganize really quickly because reorgs take too long. So how do we structure it so that all the employees can move and reorganize at the speed of AI? So that's the first thing, is like new structures and new ways of teaming need to be created by executives. And I personally think the inside job comes at the right time because that way of restructuring works really well in terms of yeah.
How do you see this restructuring? What do you mean with it?
Yeah. So for instance, if before you would want like, certain groups of people together, you'd like reorg them or put them on the same team. Now you just have to create the conditions and tell them to work together and have them ship something in a week and see what they could do in a week and test it and look at it. So executives have to can no longer wait for things to come up the chain of command to them. They're often flattening, they're often rolling up their sleeves and using the AI themselves in very tactical ways. They're asking to see the demos sooner and quicker and even getting hands-on involved in the demos. I'm seeing meetings before with senior leaders that it's going down to coding is actually happening in pitch meetings, or vibe coding is it's crazy. And it's great and it's exciting. I'd say, there's all this fear in the world about AI slop is one of the things yeah, AI does not everybody was assuming for a while AI was going to make your writing better, your coding better and stuff like that. It doesn't. It moves it to the median on the bell curve, right? So it makes unstructured stuff more structured. And it makes it more structured. It gets the punctuation better and so on. But it also makes really artistically written stuff that has edge and taste and so on less. It brings it back to the median. And so you often have to add that taste back in, and you have to find new ways of working with it so it's not removing your taste. We're seeing now lots of writing comes in this form of prosody that's line, 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 where it's piling things on top of each other and disagreeing with what it said before. It's called lineation. Do you know where that comes from? Where it writes like that? Because that's not how articles and books are written.
Hotmail Messenger?
That's how chat messages are written. That's how people talk in chat messages. Line, break, a new line, these little punchy things, casualness. So a lot of the corpus of large language models are trained on big groups of chat or how people are talking in the comments on Reddit. And that is not world-class prose, right? That's not, maybe James Joyce made the M dashes show up a little bit too much, but right, it's not Hemingway that's coming out, or Hemingway or Murakami or whatever that's coming out. More and more you're getting Reddit chat threads type stuff that's coming out. And the same words that make things sound credible are coming out. So you have to learn to use the tools for what they're good at, often as a sparring partner, a thought partner, but still add your own creativity to it. So there have been some studies that have shown that on creativity, people basically bifurcate. That in some ways, the tool for one set of the population, they actually get less creative the more they use AI. And another set of the population actually gets more creative how they use AI, because they're finding ways to use AI in ways that support their creativity, but they're not leaning on it too much to be creative for them. And so we got to learn how to be that latter one. And so we also have to learn how to use the tools. So lately, I've been obsessively vibe coding. But let me tell you, you are too?
Oh, yes. I love vibe coding now. So
okay,
go ahead.
But vibe coding, if you don't know the principles of engineering, vibe coding right now is really dangerous. And it can make a lot of mistakes. So, for instance, if you're vibe coding long enough, tell me if you've hit this one where you get a monolithic file that has tens of thousands of lines in a single file. Have you run into that?
No, I haven't gotten that far because
or thousands of lines.
I did not need those kind of solutions because
okay.
Coding is quick little tools that will help me. And I'm also testing how vibe coding was. So for example, I vibe coded a little tool to help me with podcast production. So I can listen to every recording, but then I may identify something interesting that would be valuable for the audience. Riverside does identify something, but then I use the transcript and I put it in the tool and I go I want the snippet to highlight values like A, B, and C. So to be more driven by what I need. So that tool is turning out to be very useful. So it's shrinking hours of work into something 2 hours, because I still need 2 hours. Then I vibe coded, and these are like my personal tools. I did recently. I want to build a sign up list, a waiting list for the platform that I'm building. Then I built on She Builds a learning experience on how to learn innovation challenges. But that one is not live yet because I got some feedback like, instead of repairing this one, I want to build a brand new one, even better. So at least it's driving me to understand the vibe code. But then even though I never learned coding, it educates me of what coding is about.
Yeah.
I'm looking also to read little snippets of code so that I can make changes manually without having to go to the code and do this for me. So the entire experience is very educational for me. And for me, it's like, what I'm seeing happening with vibe coding, I see this being word processing at the time of first computers and first internet. Like we needed to learn how to write a Word document. And now I feel like we need to learn how to create our own little tools so we don't have to wait for SaaS platforms to solve our problems. We can be our own problem solvers. And when we solve our own problems, then it could become somebody else's problem, or could happen that it's somebody else's problems, and that tool can become valuable for somebody else. Or you use that tool for as long as you need it, and then you just develop another one. So that's sort of like, it makes me think that it's going to make the big SaaSes bit disposable. And then I came across a research that says that apparently there are about over 40% of licenses that get purchased by companies but never get used. So that's a sunk cost, and it's in 3-digit millions of dollars. It varies from year to year, but the lowest I came across was $190 million. So depending on where you sit as a company, that could still be like even a portion of that, a lot expensive. So I feel like as employees or as individuals, as professionals in any field, vibe coding is becoming the new language of literacy.
Right. Okay. This is fascinating. So what I heard you saying is you're using it to make little productivity tools. So
Correct.
you're using tools to make your own work more productive.
And build my product, but while learning on my little tools.
Right. And so once you are building your product, if you're making bigger code and it starts getting to thousands of lines, which is what a lot of innovation does, vibe coding stuff becomes pretty sloppy because most of the data sets it's trained on were publicly facing, fairly sloppy data sets, not
Mhm.
the very rigorously maintained stuff. So what you eventually have to learn to do is realize that I can't have my system relying too much on agents. I have to have it use deterministic plumbing for some things to call the agents because agents can't hold rules and guidelines. They'll break their own rules. But also the files start getting big and it's putting business logic in routers. It's repeating itself all over the place with very similarly named things or very awkwardly named things that maybe humans can't maintain. So, or like multiple functions doing the same thing or functions doing multiple things at a time. Whereas a good engineer would do like thin routers, SRP,
Mhm.
DRY. They'll like they'll tailwindize like CSS. They'll follow a very specific methodology. Like if you're building a website, you're not going to use both, and say you're building it in Python, you're not going to use both Django and Fast API and cobble stuff together. You're going to pick one and you're going to follow that philosophy. And if you don't know that when you start vibe coding, you're going to end up a week or so in with like a ton of debt that you're throwing out, or you put Copilot CLI running in YOLO mode and it installs 200 packages, uh, like while you were out at lunch and you come back and now you have all these security vulnerabilities opened up. So like all of these things, I would say people need to learn them. And like people need to understand enough of the principles so that they're vibe coding with uh with trust
Mhm.
and safety and so on. However, companies need to provide these tools to people and provide the tokens to people. So I'd say that like where before everybody needed to have IQ,
Mhm.
right? People get hired for IQ. People rise because of EQ, which is, emotional intelligence. But
Emotionally.
now your agency quotient AQ. So the ability, like how quickly you turn things into action, how well you're able to make decisions, how well you're able to delegate, how good your decisions are, how quickly you're able to make them. Like they will eventually allow everybody to become a GM or even a CEO of their own agent workforce if they have the resources that they could use for the tokens and if they're using those well to produce return on investment. And if they're, and by the way, these systems are made to be addictive, right? You're like talking and chatting. And it's easy to have the systems making the systems instead of the systems making the work product you need to make because they're kind of designed to do that. So, how do you maintain that IQ, the EQ, add the AQ onto it, have those boundaries for yourself that you're living in a holistic way, make sure that you're getting the investments back into it so that you can afford the tokens. In a business, you need to give people tokens and a certain amount of trust, but you also need to lock down so that they're not breaking things, but not lock it down so much that they can't get anything done. And so, how do you give them enough rope to make mistakes but not hang themselves? These are the new skill
You
sets that are being
mentioned
developed.
earlier something along the lines of metered funding for innovation. Do exactly the same with the token.
Yeah, you do the same with tokens.
Start small. Give people the chance, the tool, because if somebody took me and taught me for 2 hours or 3 hours, Ilariana, this is coding, this is how it works, and all that stuff, I would listen. I would start to imagine how that looks, but nothing beats with me getting my hands dirty and trying to figure out what is coding, learning like through vibe coding and understanding then in the back and looking like, what is this? What is this? What is this? Like, how do these relate to whatever renders in the front end that I'm working at right now and how this connects on the back end? So it's all these little tokens that I'm using right now to learn by doing. And then what I'm learning is that the more that I use both the natural language processing tools, Claude and GPT or the others, or the vibe coding, the more critical I become on the outputs.
And you have to be.
And so you learn not to take for granted every output that the tool gives you. So that's why I believe that the best way to turn these tools to serve us is to become a stronger critical thinkers ourselves, not to take for granted. But if you're using these for the first time, and like if you're a non-native English speaker, for example, and you're using the tools in English, some things may seem like very exciting, very nice, and well said. But the more you use, like, this looks odd. And is this me? What do I do to make it me? So then I always say, like, okay, take that as the first draft, because it's always easier to say to refine the first draft, the first
Yeah.
version, the first edit, than to start from scratch. So I think like that's the journey of like even the companies can go like everybody can have this amount of tokens to start tinkering. And for the companies that want to start from the very beginning, if they want to be intentional, I would recommend give people a simple challenge, redesign the new employee onboarding experience. How would that look like? Use a textual tool, use a visual board to visualize how would that journey look like, how long it would last. Use a video, use whichever AI tool you want as a medium to express your creativity and your envisioning of a new solution. Could be anything, but like just give people a specific challenge to work around while learning the new tools. So could be agents down the road, whatever, but you got to start small and you got to give people the reason why to learn the new tool. Because then this one goes to the value of any innovation. If you give people that impact, if you give that journey, they know that if they once the idea past the first stage, it has a journey to grow to a product or a solution deployed. There's no bigger incentive to activate innovators than that destination.
Mm.
Of course, like for the companies that have monetary awards, those are valuable. Promotion is valuable equally. But just having an understanding that the belief, the trust that if I innovate, and if this is solving a problem for the company or our customers or our employees, it does have a destiny to become like a deployed solution. There's nothing bigger than that. We love results, and results are the biggest drive. So I really enjoy all the conversations with you.
It's
And
been great.
before I let you go to the rest of your evening. I love concluding these conversations with a question that you have about activating innovators that is still puzzling you, and you would love to pass this question on to the audience and see what the audience has to say.
Okay, I'm thinking. Okay, a question I think about is like when is the right time? What is the boundary between, like I act as a coach. And as a coach, I provide a lot of activation energy to my teams just by being interested in them. I usually believe in them more than they do, more than they believe in themselves. But sometimes that translates also into believing in them and their own idea. And so where do I draw where does somebody draw the line in believing in a person's project when the data coming back may not be supporting it yet? So, like, when is it that, oh, you need to look here or look for more data versus, you know what, it might be better to invest in another project? Where do you draw that line?
Love this question. I love this question. And I am really hoping that a lot of people in the audience were going to love it and then see what they have to say and what they have to share to both you and I. Ed, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom and inspiration about activating innovators, innovation, and innovation culture. Good luck with your work and keep us posted on how you're doing and how the inside job is inspiring other leaders and innovators around the globe.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
This conversation was music to my ears, honestly, because what Ed shared confirmed what I deeply believe, and that is that there are innovators in every organization among all the employees, and all we need is programs like Garage to activate that innovation potential. But what I was surprised to learn from Ed is the reason why programs like these work, and that is that they activate the positive emotions among people. These emotions broaden the thinking, broaden the relationships, and in return, they become the fuel, the drive to build something new. That's amazing, right? Pretty impressive. So as you start contemplating of how you might activate the innovators already in your organization, start by asking the question, what do you need to do to activate those positive emotions to work in your setting? And when you do so, remember that the best builds don't necessarily come from individual innovators, but they come from those that self-select, the teams that come together to complement each other's superpowers, just like the Heist teams. Somebody is a change maker, somebody is a deal maker, somebody is a taste maker. And all you need to activate these is the challenge. Call it a challenge, call it a competition, call it a hackathon, but mind that experiences like this act as two-sided marketplaces, like the connectors between the problem and the solution. So think about these, and if you want to learn a bit more about it, check the Open Solve Studio website, because that's exactly the reason why we exist, to help leaders like you, with or without innovation in your title, to activate innovators, innovation, and innovation culture or capability. But before I let you go, mind that Ed left us with a very amazing, very interesting question for you to answer. And know that this is the second time that the same question is being asked. So if it's being asked for 2 times almost in a row, there must be something about it of how do we decide in innovation projects. So what Ed specifically wanted to know is the following. When is it that you need to look for more data for an innovation project versus to decide to invest into something new? Or where do you draw that line between believing in a person's project when the data coming back may not be supporting it yet? So Ed wants to know, I want to know. Share your answer in any format that works for you. And if you want to share that in a DM or a post or a video message, just make sure that you tag Ed and myself, because we're really curious to know. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Click follow and subscribe, because that matters to us, that inspire us to bring more valuable conversations and stories and experience to you. And until the next episode, stay curious and keep activating.